Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Azure Back to School live stream. Today we have a great presentation from Elkhan on the Microsoft Azure Architect certification. Follow along. Feel free to put any questions you might have in the chat, and if you're wondering more about the schedule for Azure Back to School, you can go to azureback2school.github.io and get the day's content. But without any delay, I would like to turn it over to Elkhan to provide his presentation. Thank you very much, and I appreciate your session, Elkhan, and your contribution to Azure Back to School. To you, Elkhan. Can you hear me? You good?
Yes. All right. Thank you. There was a little bit kind of slowness in connection. But good morning, everyone. Welcome to Azure Back to School session,
Okay.
and thank you, Dwayne, for introduction. It's a connected virtual world, and sometimes there might be some disconnection, this and that. So if you feel that there is some slowness or you get some issues, please raise your hand or put a comment in the chat, and you'll take that into account. But again, welcome everyone. Thank you, Dwayne, for introduction. So what we are going to do today is first, I would like to thank the organizers of this event. It is back to back for a couple years now that we have Azure Back to School. Dwayne and Daring are doing a great job by organizing and bringing the speakers here. In terms of viewers, you are all very welcome, and thank you for joining my session. Thank you for considering, being up and looking at this. So extra shout out for everyone who is going to put some comments and be part of this great interaction. And thank you, my family. So in terms of what we are going to cover today is we are going to look at what happened to Microsoft Azure Architect exam, namely AZ-305, how you can get certified in Azure in Microsoft Azure Architect and become an expert, and as well as what is the path to take you there, right, to become certified. But in addition to that, as you know, this certification has been there for a while, and in the last year, and especially starting from August 7th, there are some changes that are going to be implemented on this certification. So I'm going to cover those things as well, in addition to exam objectives and what's going to change. So I hope you are very excited to have this journey, and let's start it. So, Dwayne made a quick introduction, so thank you for that. But briefly about myself is I have been a Microsoft certified trainer since 2007, and I had a good opportunity to practice Microsoft Azure. I'm also Microsoft Azure MVP and very honored to be re-awarded and re-nominated this year, and I'm staying as Microsoft MP for another year. That's a great tech community. In addition to that, as you see here from my social profile, I have a blog post that I'm running. Usually, I post most of the things on LinkedIn. So if you are not connected with me on LinkedIn, give it a follow on the LinkedIn and Twitter so you can get all the latest. Because I like to share the things about uh, Azure architecture, cloud architecture, and security related topics where automation is really, really important piece of it. I am a founder of the Cloud Marathoner blog post and the Cloud Marathoner, so to speak, movement. And what it does is basically is that hashtag that we have on a LinkedIn called Cloud Marathoner. We promote and share the cloud and Microsoft Azure journey roadmap and steps focused toward building automation and bringing knowledge. And by these pieces of sharing on the LinkedIn and as well as on my blog platform, I do encourage everyone to share useful tips and beats in your journey, in your cloud journey, and help the beginners to succeed. And I'm also active member of Cloud Launch and Learn team. We actively participate in the Cloud family events. That's enough about myself. Please type in comments if you would like to introduce yourself or put some words about yourself or what you would like to learn from this session. Okay, before kicking off to the agenda of the meeting, I would like to give couple words about the company where I'm working, about the T-Rex Solutions. This infographic about what we do. It's one of the best companies in the area where I work on delivery of mission critical cloud enabled solutions to our customers with our teams of engineers and architects that I'm very honored to lead. We have strong partnership with cloud solution providers, and our company does support development of local communities in the area. So if you are open for new opportunities and you are open in the market, then check out our open positions, or you can reach out directly to me if you have any questions. All right, so what we are going to cover today. Uh, so as you know, as the topic says, it's all about what you need to know about Microsoft Azure Architect exam in terms of changes and updates that happen. But in addition to that, we'll start first with the journey, right? Because getting into that certification Microsoft Azure Architect is not an easy task. You have to plan for it, and there are some prerequisites that you need to fill in. So we are going to touch upon. So in this presentation, I'm going to touch upon that to show where you start, what are the resources, what is the journey that you expect, and how you get that Microsoft Azure Expert Architect certification at the end. So first we start with where to start our cloud journey. Then we'll look into the change that happened in 2023, namely after the August 7, 2023, there are a number of major changes that came to the exam. So we'll look into those exam objectives that are going to change. And then we'll look into some learning resources that are going to be helpful for you. Some of them are video resources that are created by community or by the Microsoft Learn program themselves. And finally, we'll have some time for Q&A at the end of the session. If it sounds right for you, then let's kick off the meeting. But in the meanwhile, as Dwayne already mentioned, if you have any questions, okay, please make sure that you put that in the comments and we will address them. And thank you everyone who put the hello and hi messages on the YouTube channel already. Okay, so let's kickstart with the first part, where to start your certification journey. So first of all, this is a nice infographic which I borrowed from Microsoft themselves, is where it shows the path how to become an Azure Solution Architect expert. First of all, before part of this journey is you need to acquire certification of Azure Administrator Associate, right? So this is one of the important milestones that you need to have in place, but there is no exact order, meaning that if you get your Azure Architect AZ-305 exam first, and then you go after your Azure Administrator Associate, that would work as well. And with Azure Administrator Associate, what I'm trying to mimic is it's exam number AZ-104, right? So you can take that in any order, but once you get both pairs of the exam, both pairs of the exam, once you pass them both, then you actually get this Microsoft Certified Azure Solution Architect Expert badge, and as well as the certifications. Okay, so let's go by the map that we have here. So first, of course, we will start with the Microsoft Certified Administration Associate. So if you have it already, that's great. If you don't, you would need to get that uh, later if you didn't plan to study for that. But this is more of a hands-on kind of experience that you need to have in place to manage and administer the Microsoft Azure environment. Next thing is, of course, the preparation materials, right? So you have actually a couple choices there. You can go either with the instructor-led training, which is uh, go by the course number AZ-305T00. That's how it usually goes. And it is a couple days of instructor-led training, which you need to register. Hopefully your company has some certification or study budget that you can use along the side. But this is where you get the live instructor, and you interact basically with the instructor and with the people inside the classroom. Then once you basically start that training, if you don't want to or you don't have enough time to attend the classroom, you can also go self-paced training, right? With the self-paced training, I will share some links on which type of hands-on labs you may want to use, and if you are trying to do that on your own, then we'll look into Microsoft Azure Docs. There's Azure Architecture Center as well, which I'm going to again provide the links about that in this session later, and we'll look at some official practice tests. In addition to that, I want to also give a big kudos to Microsoft Learn, because they also produced approximately 50 questions of practice tests that you can try to look into. But the point with the practice test is that you want to make sure that first you actually go and review and cover the material, and then you try practice test, because that's going to be the one of the ways how you can cover the gaps in your knowledge. Some people do it vice versa. They take the practice exam first, right? They identify their weak points, they go and study them, and then they retake the practice test. But that's different ways how depending on what's your preferences, you can get up to speed in your learning. In terms of work experience before heading to the Azure Microsoft Azure Solutions Architect Expert exam, I would say that you really need to have some good understanding and experience in Azure administration, and you need to have some advanced knowledge in terms of how components of Azure architecture are working together, and what are the big pieces, and what's the integration there, right? So having that knowledge and experience will definitely help you. In addition to that, experience with some Azure development, Azure DevOps is also desired. Part of this exam may also ask you about some declaration of resources using the Bicep language. Uh, you wouldn't get too much of that, but again, knowing the Bicep language and how to declare your Azure resources using the Bicep code is, I would say, important. One of the pieces of important knowledge that you would need to have in place. All right, so once you basically have close to that work experience and desire to, learn and become knowledgeable in Azure architecture, and you cover the self-study resources, then you are, are ready to hit for the exam. And but before hitting exam, let's see what you would expect to see in that exam, right? So what are the changes and what you would expect to see? Okay, so that said, we have mainly we have four groups, right? So you can put them into domain of knowledges, so to speak, but there are certain percentage of questions that come from the domain knowledge. And first group, as you see here, it starts with designing the identity, governance, and monitoring solutions. And what I would do in the, following this presentation, for each group of these domain objectives, I will pick one of the exam objectives, because if I cover all of them, it's going to be impossible. But at least covering some pieces of each domain objectives in group one, group two, three, and four, I think it will give you some taste about what to expect. So group one, we already mentioned that. In group two, we have 24% of the questions are expected from there, where you look into designing data storage solutions. What are the options there? Then we have group three, where we have the designing business continuity solutions. So that it has the smallest amount, but again, each of these groups are very important to get enough knowledge to pass your exam. And with business continuity solutions, this is very critical part of any, enterprise, any company that's trying to provide the services to the client. And group number four is one of the biggest ones, designing infrastructure solutions. And I would say there's also a LinkedIn learning course about that, which I created a couple of months ago. So you are also very welcome to go and check that. So I will have a link later on in the course. But let's dive into each group and see what, at least pick one exam objective from each group and get up to speed on that. All right, so the first one is designing identity governance and monitoring solutions. It comes with three main parts. First one is the logging and monitoring solutions. Second one is designing the authentication and authorization solutions, and then we have designing the governance, right? And with the governance, we talk about how you can have the guardrails, how you can. Uh, Let me repeat that. With design governance, what we are talking about there is how you can set up the guardrails in your solution so you can have better governance, how you can set your Azure policies and automation to make sure that you have compliant environment for the customer. And all this compliance is going to be driven by the requirements of your solution. So that said, let's start with the first one and cover at least the monitoring solution. So let's look at that. So first one is monitoring Azure Monitoring. Basically, that's the name of service. But as you know, Azure Monitoring is the main monitoring platform in Azure, and what it does is basically it includes the metric logs. It includes a collection of the metrics, logs, traces, and changes, and it monitors the data sources which are illustrated on the diagram that you see here, right? So we have diagram here, data get collected, and Azure Monitor is the service that does it. But when we speak about Azure Monitor, we also need to mention that it is built up on top of Log Analytics. So Log Analytics is basically the technology, the service that actually powers the monitoring. And this is very powerful service because by using the Azure Monitoring, you and your applications, you are able to gather those metrics, logs, and traces and change that happen uh, in your tenant, in your application, in your subscription, in your infrastructure, and the resources that are under your subscription, and overall within the Azure platform, right? Including the custom sources of data that you can additionally ingest in your log analytics workspace. And what I mean by that is, let's say you have a hybrid scenario, right? So you have some logging that happens on your on-prem servers that you want to add into a big picture. At that point, you can customize sources, logging sources, and then provide them into your log analytics workspace so that you have one central space where you can look into what's happened in your environment. So you can have a better, uh, you can enable that visibility into what's happening in your environment. But overall, with Azure Monitoring services, it encapsulates a lot of different services. And as you see, once the data captured by Azure Monitoring, then actually those metrics, logs, trace, and change, they are feed into consumption, into some visualization, some insights, and some analysis that can give you rapid responses in terms of if there is, for example, unexpected change in the settings of the services that you want to alert the administrator group, you can do those automations and bring value to your company. Okay, next we have the group number 2 here. So it also comes with 3 sub categories. As we see, the first one is designing the data storage solutions for relational data. Then we have this designing the storage solution for semi-structured and unstructured data. And we have designing data for the integration. So the main objective under this group is more of a getting understanding of set of data and what type of data you want to use for your project, right? So first you need to understand the nature of your business, what type of data is getting collected, and what is the best storage service to to utilize uh, to store and as well as process that data. So if you look at it from the big perspective, you would see that we first we would need to have these Azure Storage Services where we need to identify and define the type of data, and we need to design our storage based on type of data that we are going to process or we are going to collect from the environment. So in terms of different types of data, as you see, we can have relational data, and with relational data, it's if you have been doing the IT for a long time, you know that that was one of the primary ways of collecting data in last, let's say, 10 years or 15 years. But with structured data, it also comes with own difficulties and challenges. And part of it is having this rigid schema that needs to be followed, and you don't have that flexibility of changing the or adding new parameters or properties into your structured data, namely into your tables. And when we speak about again structured data, it's all about having a some type of database table that has some rows, columns, and keys. And usually anything that you deal with transactions where you have the data that's structured into spreadsheet, that's where where you have basically firm schema of the data that you expect, that there's no deviation expected to happen. Then you want to go with relational data stores and services that are provided. And just to give an example, because you are very attentive and knowledgeable, so if anyone wants to put in the chat any service that actually use the structured data, you are more than welcome. But I will give you a tip here. One of them is called Azure SQL, right? Azure SQL databases, they are meant to be used for structured data, even though you can have some, JSON type of data there, but still it's mainly used for structured data. Next, we of course we have semi-structured data, which is less organized and it is flexible. And with semi-structured data, there we have data types collected like in the forms of XML or JSON or YAML. So where you have certain structure in your data, but it is not firmly enforced, meaning that we don't have a rigid schema that you have to follow. So that if you are collecting data from your application, and let's say down the road within a month or two, there are some updates into data, or you need to add or remove certain new properties to the objects or to the items that you are tracking on your web application, you can actually do that. You have that flexibility to do with your semi-structured data. Let's say, namely, you are using JSON, and you can do that. Another one is unstructured data, which is more of media files. For example, Word or Excel documents can fall into that, even though you can also take the Excel documents and transfer let me say, you can take your Excel documents and you can put some type of processing where you can convert them into more of a structured data. But again, the media documents, your pictures, your videos, they are all go as unstructured data, which means that you don't expect any structure there. You collect them as blobs and you need to organize them into non-relational format. That's kind of a little bit about the data types, but if you if you look into part of this actually exam domain objective is that you also need to get good understanding in terms of where you can use that relational data products, right? And by that, what we mean is that good understanding of the services and when to choose one or another, when to choose the appropriate one for your business and solution. So, for example, here on the right side, we have a diagram which supposed to help us in terms of identifying the database and as well as software where we want to host our operating system. So for example, here, if we need control over those things, it means that we need to use some infrastructure as a service where we can deploy and have full control of our database, relational data product on a VM, on a virtual machine. But if we don't seek to have that much control, high level control over the operating system and as well as the database software, then we can utilize some other databases. So in case of this uh, example that you see here, there are products like Azure Cosmos DB. There are ways how you can run your SQL Server on as a platform, or you can run as an infrastructure as a service using the virtual machine, and as well as you can use the uh, open source database types like PostgreSQL, MariaDB. That's going to be another set of things where you can run your database and relational data solutions in Microsoft Azure environment. That said, let's switch the gears here and go to the group number 3. We have one more to cover, and then we'll look into the upcoming change. So group number 3 is uh, covering the exam domain objectives related to the designing the business continuity and solutions. And the first one is focusing more on backup and disaster recovery services, and another, and the second one focused on high availability. They are a very critical part of any business to run. So even though they are not the, you know, they are not covered in the, they wouldn't, you wouldn't get too many questions regarding this, but there would be a couple of questions coming from this domain area. So if you look at the backup and disaster recovery methods, you would see that we have a couple here, and namely, we have the depending on what type of uh, scenario we are trying to use for our disaster recovery uh, solution, there are different services that we can pick and choose from, right? So here, for example, if we are doing some, we have some on-premise machines and we want to perform some backups, then there are solutions that we can choose from, like Azure Backup or Azure Site Recovery. Or if you're trying to uh, make some backups and disaster recovery for the Azure VMs running on your production workloads, that's another place where you can use them. Then, of course, we also have the virtual machine snapshot and MABS, which stands for Microsoft Azure Backup Services, right? That's kind of abbreviation for that. And then you would, where you would use those services is when you have a need to back up your managed disks at any point in time, and as well as you would need to have some read-only full copy of the managed disks. So these are the some of the scenarios where you want to identify what type of disaster recovery method works best for your solution and for your customer's requirement, and then choose the right option uh, for your customers. Next, in the this is the domain objective for the group 4. This is the probably the biggest chunk of the, I would say, questions are coming from this portion of the exam. And if you look at them, you would see that there is some emphasis toward designing a compute solution. We have emphasis toward application architecture. We have some migrations and as well as network solutions. So I'm going to focus more on choosing the compute services, just kind of to give you some idea. But uh, this is pretty big domain area, which probably you would want to spend most of your time studying and understanding them. So starting with the first one, compute solutions, as it is on the slide. If you look at closer look, there are a number of different compute solutions, right, that you can choose from. And this is the nice graphic here, kind of in a pathway where when you start and you're trying to figure out what is the best compute solution for your scenario. In this case, you would see that depending on your customer requirements, where you want to add some customization or optimization into your solution before moving that into the cloud, or actually provisioning that solution in the cloud, you have options from lift and shift or cloud optimize, and as well as migrate or build. And based on that, as you see here, you have options to run your high performing compute workloads, microservice architecture. You have an option even go with the containerization options where you can use the Azure App Service containers, or if you require actually full orchestration of your containers, another option that you have is to use the Azure Kubernetes services, right? But if what you are doing is done on the very compressed time frame where you don't have much room, much breathing room for the redesigning, resolutioning, or optimizing your solution before making them available for your customer. At that point, probably the fastest way is, even though it's not the preferred way, is to follow the lift and shift. But certain scenarios where you are very uh, customized, where you have very customized software that's hard to containerize, or it will take some time to containerize that. and it has some specific software installed, then you may go with lift and shift, which means that you would either choose between your virtual Azure machines or some past services that are readily available to basically provide you services and enable those services, customer services for the to be up and running in very short amount of time. But all right, that said, now we come to the next section of our presentation where we are going to focus on some major changes that are expected, that are actually get implemented after August 7th, and you should expect them to happening. So meanwhile, I will check the chat here, and it looks, couple greetings here. So we'll continue, but in the meanwhile, if you have any questions, please put them into chat. Okay, so what are those changes? So first, there's expected some. The first change, major change, is going to happen in an area that's all about designing authentication and authorization solutions. So you would get more of a domain objective change to focus more toward authentication solutions. Then it will focus toward identity management solutions, and for and it will focus on the set of skills that you would need to have in place to recommend a solution for authorizing access to Azure resources, and as well as uh, recommend a solution to manage secrets, certificates, and keys. So that's going to be the change on that first major domain objective. Second one is designing for high availability. In this section, there's a change where you need to have skills and knowledge to recommend a high availability solution for compute, and then you would need skills to recommend a high availability solution for relational data, and as well as have the skills to recommend again high availability solution, this time for semi-structured and unstructured data. And I'll put the link in the chat regarding that guide right now. Let me see if I can. No, I can't join the chat. I'll put that in the private chat for now. Then we'll move that into the main chat area where you can actually look at that document. All right, where you can look at that document and all other changes. But in addition to that change, I want to mention that it's not just the additions or change, but you also have some removal, right? Certain skills are not going to be asked on exam anymore. And first of one is designing identities and access for applications. So that thing is removed from the exam objective. So that's first thing. And another thing that get removed is the recommendation of data storage solutions. So instead of data storage solutions, there's more focus toward the inner workings of that. So you would get more of a semi-structured, structured, and relational data solution questions. All right, that's it. Let's move along here to the next stage in our presentation, and this is going to be about learning resources for this exam, right? So we have a number of them. First one is before you go, actually, within this YouTube video, in the comments, I'll put a link to the GitHub repo, okay, where you can get all those slides and links to them. All right. So if you miss any, don't worry. Just check out the GitHub repo of the presentation. So first one is Microsoft Learn modules, right? So, and if you look at them, there are a number of them there. Let me just open at least that one. And I put all those Microsoft Learn modules in one place for you. So let me see. I'll just bring the browser now to the screen so you can see them all. Here we go. So these modules, basically, there are modules starting with AZ-305. Start with design prerequisites, then you have infrastructure solution, data solutions, continued solutions, you have governance, monitoring, and solutions, and of course you have some information that asks you about Azure well-architected framework and as well as how you can accelerate your cloud adoption using the cloud adoption framework for Azure. So these are the main modules that are you would need to study and get ready. Next, we have a very good set of learning resources here coming from Cloud Marathoner study blog. So that study guide have been generated more than a year ago. I'm going through some updates to reflect what's happening, uh, to reflect all the changes that are going to be in place starting from August 7th. And then we have the blog post from Thomas. His blog is also good, but it also requires some updates there because these changes have been just recently dropped, so to speak. Then we have official practice tests, right? That uh, you can go ahead and use. Those practice tests are officially coming from Measure Up. Then you have some good information from John Saville's StudyCram, but it also requires a little bit of update there. Then we have labs and exercises, okay, from the GitHub repo from Microsoft Learn AZ-305. Then we have Azure Architecture Center where you can get some, I would say, jumpstart ideas about how you can have some reference architecture when you are trying to build solutions and you want to get some ideas where to start. The another one is for the exam, you want to check Microsoft Exam Emulator. That's the emulator where give you some idea about what are the uh, environment and what to expect in terms of um, overall user experience during your exam. And finally, we have practice exam. And for practice exam, actually, I'm going to let me just show it. So practice exam, I'm going to show that within these browsers with the practice exam. It's actually a good way to once you cover all the materials, it's one of the good ways to go and just check your knowledge, right? To see which uh, questions you are good at in terms of understanding and answering them, and which ones you have still some gaps that you want to learn about. For example, here we get the question number one. You are configuring diagnostic logging for Azure App Services, right? And you need to recommend solution to ensure trace and debug events are logged. Which level of logging should you recommend? So as you know, uh, so there are like different levels, and you can put your answer and choose. But information is basically will log everything, where both will get the most information out of it. So you have warning and you have errors. So in this case, you may go with the warning and check it. If it is wrong, which is fine, you would get some understanding why your selection is correct or it's not correct. And in this case, you get some good references and you can check your answers and go to the next one and do this type of practice test, till you hit the right one. Okay, so this is one of the good ways to practice and get ready for the exam day. So next is actually case studies, right? So within your exam, you should expect some case studies. And what's a case study? It's basically some type of ready scenario where you are going to review that solutioning scenario based on questions on design and architecture. For example, the the diagram that we have on the right side, it's about a case study where a fictitious company called Tailwind Traders is looking to update their website to include customer supplied product images in addition to the existing photos provided by marketing. They believe that having more photos of products in use will give potential customers a better feel for how past customers love their products after purchasing them. They do have some requirements, and those requirements are reflecting as a question. So you may have those requirements as a question saying where should the image be stored and how will you ensure that all images are scanned even when uploads are outpacing the scanning, and as well as once the images are approved and the catalog database is updated, how will the customer be notified? So this type of case studies, they are part of the Microsoft Learn GitHub repo, and I will provide the you know URL for that, so you can go ahead and check it. So it will come as part of the slides once you get them from the GitHub repo, presentation GitHub repo. But this is one way to get you up to speed of understanding of case studies and how to get yourself mentally prepared for that type of questions. So this is the LinkedIn video course that's covering the fourth part of the exam, which is the design infrastructure solutions. And I'm going to just kind of let me see where it is. I'm just going to show the link how you can access it. And if you are interested and you have your LinkedIn Learning platform subscription, you are more than welcome to give it a try. So this is how it looks like, and I'm opening that on another video. So it goes through each domain objective to basically prepare you to the exam, and it covers them on a high level. It doesn't dive into the practical scenarios, or it dives into discussing those architecture and scenarios. So that's why I would say check it out if you can before hitting the exam button. All right, that's it. Let me stop this and go back to the next one. If you want to use the QCR code to scan and have access, it's here on the right side. Please do that. All right, next what we have is when you are preparing, of course, for the exam, uh, you would want to run a couple of tests, right? Kind of see how the services are integrated with each other, how you can utilize them. For that reason, we have this Azure. You can go to the Azure, you can provision an Azure subscription that comes free if you never did that, and you can use that for the next 30 days or till you use all those credits that are provided with that. That's one of the good ways. And once the credits are expired, no problem. There are certain services, and there are 40 plus services that will stay always free, so you can use them once your subscription is expired. Okay, but you may want to extend that subscription time so that they don't shut down your subscription. So it may ask you for some credentials and details, but if you use those free services, you are not going to be charged for usage of those services. That's one of the ways how you can still utilize your Microsoft Azure subscription and services uh, without being charged for the services. Okay, that said, this was the main part of the presentation. So we came to the section where we have the we have the questions and answers Q&A section. So is there any questions that you have? Please put them in the chat. So if I see them, I will respond. So in terms of where you want to start your AZ-305 Microsoft Azure Architect exam uh, preparations and the journey in becoming an Azure architect. So please put those questions. Meanwhile, I'll just recover and we'll walk through the things that we covered in this presentation. So first we start with that journey map, right? How you can become a uh, Microsoft Azure Architect by following certain paths and learning materials that are provided on the slide that we just covered in the beginning of the section. Then what we looked into is what are the prerequisites and what are the changes that are expected to happen in Microsoft Azure, right? In Microsoft Azure Architect exam. And those changes are effective starting from August 7th, right? That we mentioned a couple times. And we looked certain things where there were major changes and there are some minor changes as well. Then we looked into some learning resources for exam. We covered those learning modules. There are a couple of them that you want to finish. But if you have the time and budget to study using the instructor-led trainings, ILTs, I would strongly recommend that because you would get that direct interaction with the trainer, and you will also learn within the study process what are the questions that other students are wondering about and what are the issues that they are trying to solve. So being in the classroom with the live audience, or doing that remotely, I believe that has its own big value depending on how much time and energy you want to invest into process. And I would say the more you learn, the better you would understand the technology and integration services, and more questions will come after that. And that's the one of the great benefits of being engaged, because cloud services and delivering the customer services using the cloud solutions is here. It's gonna stay, and there's more and more interest toward that. So please check that one, and as well as understand what are the hybrid scenarios where you want to utilize cloud services in order to give that competitive edge to to your company where you are trying to help your customers. Okay, and finally, it's the Q&A section, which we briefly went through. So meanwhile, till the end of this session, you are still welcome to put some questions in the chat so we can address them. And I see some people put the hi. So Thomas and Ayub, thank you for putting your comments there in the chat. And if anyone else is watching this YouTube video later, you are more than welcome to come and uh, put the comments there and ping us, right? So we'll get back to you. All right, this is the QCR codes at the end. So this is Cloud Marathoner Study Guide on the left side here. Then we have Microsoft Learn AZ-305 modules that you would need to cover for preparations. Then we have this awesome Azure Architecture GitHub, which is covering some of the good learning resources that you want to look into. And finally, we have this LinkedIn course on AZ-305 Designing Infrastructure Solutions that you can check out and get it as an additional preparation resource for your exam. That said, I want to say big thank you for the again organizers of this event, Azure Back to School. And if you want to get connected with me, from the LinkedIn, Twitter, or from the blog, you're more than welcome to hit back with the message. I would be glad to get connected. Back to you, Dwayne.
Thanks, Elhan. Hey, quick question for you, and
Yes.
about preparation for the AZ-305. This is something
Mm-hmm.
that I get asked anytime I do any kind of, know before you go or ask the experts type of webinar.
Mm-hmm.
Is how long does it? How long would you say preparation for the AZ-305 would take you in terms of getting to a comfortable level to pass the exam?
Yes. I think that's really good and hard question because it is going to vary depending on your experience. And what I mean by that is like, okay, if you have been doing Azure administration for at least a year and year and a half, and then you had some you have been exposed into some solutioning sessions basically that your company might be doing for business development or some related activities, then I would say it wouldn't take you long, maybe a couple weeks of getting through the Azure study modules, right, understanding each piece, what they are for, and the purpose of each solution and integration points. And once you have that knowledge, I would say it's just a couple of weeks. I know some people who just need to address their gaps within first months, and then they hit the exam and they were able to pass. But if you're coming from, let's say, a different pathway, let's say you didn't have much opportunity to do Azure administration, right? So but let's say a couple of years ago you pass your Azure Administrator exam already, but you didn't use it, right? So you don't have that skills. Uh, then it's going to be a bit harder for you because you would have to put extra effort to kind of close the gap in the knowledge and understanding how to operate services, and what are the, I would say, limits of the services, right? What are the
Mhm.
ways you can do that? Then I would say I know some people who took like 6 to 8 months, I'll be honest, to get up to speed to before hitting the exam button. And at that point, it's, I would say, again, you are not going to waste any time, because you will learn things that you are don't know about or you didn't have experience to deal with. That's going to be valuable. But I would say that, as you know, Dwayne, the Microsoft exams, the not the fundamentals ones, but the associate and above, they become an open book, meaning that you can go and during the exam look at Microsoft Learn, right? You have that possibility now, which wasn't the case a month or two ago. Uh, that's actually a big relief, because if you at least know the name of services and their capabilities, right, and you
Mhm.
forget some inner details in terms of, like, certain limits, right? It can be limit on, for example, how many storage accounts you may have in a subscription. There's certain initial limit, right? There's like, so if you forget that number, but you know what's the topic and what's the, then through this, quick search, you can find that information very quickly. So again, investing your time in learn modules, understanding how they work, and having this at least high level understanding of integration of services will be very helpful. Maybe because of this open book stuff, you wouldn't have to spend now 6 or 8 months, but it would be enough to have just 4 months of study. But again, any time you put into that study, I think it will pay off in long term. So take that more of a, trying to, uh, you know, it's a kind of technical depth that you pay off your time to learn and get up to speed, and then you would be, up and running and ready to hit the exam.
Yeah, yeah, good. It's exactly how I answer it when I'm asked the same question. You can't,
And
you can't put a time box in any of
yes, you
it.
can.
But yeah, very well done, Elhan, as always, and great resources that you provided. If you're listening to this and to get all of those QR codes, you can certainly go back,
Yeah,
go to the Azure Back to School YouTube channel and find this presentation and get those QR codes. I also put the
and
Microsoft Learn
before,
study
yeah,
guide
they
in
can
chat.
use
So
the QR code.
go ahead,
hmm
Alan.
I will just also, Dwayne, add the, this GitHub. I'm sharing the GitHub profile that I have. So the
Hmm.
reason is here, if you scroll down, you have this presentations part. So I didn't upload it yet, but for Azure Back to School, if you come back later today, I would say, end of the day would be better. I will put another one, Azure Back to School 2023, and I'll put this presentation there, which is going to be a clickable, so that all the links that you saw on the presentation, you can just go and click on it, and you would be able to access the resource in addition to that QCR codes that you saw. And what
Hmm.
I mean by that is, if you look here into the previous slide where we covered these
Yep.
learning materials, so that's all these links are going to be clickable. So I would highly encourage everyone to use those resources and reach back to
What is
me
yeah,
if you didn't. Yeah.
great? What's your GitHub repo?
Yes. So let me actually paste that
Yeah, paste it in the
URL.
paste that
Yes,
into
that
the
would be
private
great.
chat, and I'll put it
Yes,
into
yes.
the comments
It
so
requires me
everybody
to
will be able
log
to see.
in before putting anything there.
Perfect.
Yeah, should be there.
Yep.
And this is the these are the links that we talked about. But again, coming back to what Dwayne just mentioned, these are the QCR codes. In addition to that, I forgot to put that GitHub repo, but I have to put that one. And awesome Azure architecture. I will just also maybe cover that in short, because we have some time, few minutes
Sure.
here. So with Azure awesome architecture, so we have this awesome stuff here. Let me find that repo first. Awesome. Yeah. So awesome Azure architecture. So what it is basically a good set of things that are created by the MVP Luke Murray. And what it is basically a set of documents. It's maintained, but it might be a little bit out of date based on the links. So if they don't work, just let the Luke know, or myself will go and update them. But this has comes with a lot of kind of information in terms of the services where you can find them and where they are. So this is another set of good resources that you can go and look into when you're studying. But again, first I would definitely recommend start with Azure Learn modules because this is the main source of information. But the rest is more of a kind of additional information for the resources, which you can find a ton of them, right? Because this exam has been there for years now, maybe 3 or 4 years now. That's why there's a big chunk of information. And my advice to the students is usually, when you get that information, look at the source date when it was published. For example, anything that has been done in 2022 or before August 2023, it would not include those updates, major updates that are coming, actually, that became available this year, basically from August 7th. So just be, attentive about that, and then you are good. Yeah.
Perfect.
Yeah.
Thank you very much, Elhan. Great presentation, and thank you again for your contribution, your multiple contributions, because you'll be back in a few weeks to
Yes,
present as well. So thank you very much. Appreciate your
that's a good
willingness.
prompt. Thank you. And I would expect everyone back on 27th of September. We'll be back here talking about again Azure, but this time how you can, manage your infrastructure as a code using the Bicep language.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Great. Thank you very much, Elhan.
All
And
right.
thanks everybody for attending. Thank you to all the contributions and to my co-organizer, Derek Smith, for all the work he did putting together the schedule and helping me out again this year. And again, thanks for all the presentations. And thank you, Elhan, and everybody. Have a great day and see you. We'll have another live stream tomorrow as well. So closing out the week with another live stream. So thanks, everybody.
Take care,
And have a
everyone.
great rest
Thank
of your
you.
day.
Thank you. Thank you, Dwayne. Thank you, everyone. Bye.